When my father was in his late 50s, he bought an African gray. He had loved parrots his whole life, so after he retired he named the bird Kevin. My father taught Kevin a whole vocabulary of words, and he actually trained him to understand the meaning of some words, like hello, how are you, food, thank you, good, and so on. My father passed away at the age of 70, and with that it was time for my siblings to figure out what to do with Kevin. My brother and sister didn't want it. It was the responsibility of taking Kevin home, and their spouses were against it, but I couldn't bear the idea of giving him a new home. Kevin was one of the last relationships I had with my father and was in a sense his best friend, so I decided I would take him to my house. I keep his cage in my house's cage. My house doesn't have a basement, so the cage is considered the lowest level of the house. Kevin is a moderately noisy bird. He can be chatty for a few hours during the day. Usually. Before but towards the end of the day and at night when he is very noisy he goes quiet. I throw a blanket over his cage and that usually calms him down. I watch TV in the den to be with him at night. Then around 10 p.m., I go to my room to put him to sleep. That's Kevin's backstory. I've been taking care of him for 2 years, so I know exactly how he behaves, and when he behaves abnormally, he behaves abnormally. It was around 11 p.m. one night in December. Kevin started making noises while I was trying to sleep. I sleep with the door open because I live alone and I should be able to hear something if something happens in the house. It was unusual to hear him screaming in the dark, especially late at night. There was no doubt and something was bothering him. I went to the den to see what was bothering him. He was awake in the bottom of the cage. He was looking at me and saying hello, what's up, and his name. All the time he was bobbing his head up and down and moving his whole body like he was dancing. I tried to feed him but he wouldn't eat, so I covered him with a blanket hoping he would stop. I was in the kitchen when I stopped in because he was still making noises and I thought he wouldn't stop working the next day. I couldn't lose sleep over him. I really didn't know what to do. I'm still not exactly a bird expert. I went back downstairs and untied him. He was still doing his little dance, shaking his head and body and making sounds of pain. I thought I could hear something in the pantry cupboard a few feet from his cage. I walked over to him and put my hand on the light switch. The pantry door was on the outside. The door had a large glass panel like many pantry doors. So when I flipped the light switch I could see the outline of a dead body inside. My flight response kicked in and I chose fight. I opened the door, screaming to try to get my adrenaline going, and I grabbed the guy in the pantry cupboard and threw him to the floor. He tried to fight but I easily overpowered him and could only describe him as strangling. He was some homeless-looking man in his 50s with a smell that matched his. I yelled at him, "Who the hell are you in my house?" while he tried to grab my face and my eyes or something, but I kept punching him with my knee. Kevin was going crazy during all of this. When the guy on the floor in his cage seemed weak enough, I literally ran for the nearest phone and came right back and laid him on the ground while I called 911. The guy was taken to jail, but they didn't know anything about him, that he was homeless and had nothing to his name, and so he was what some people would consider evidence for a trial. Even if I tried to sue him I wouldn't get anything from him. He went through my pantry cupboard that night and opened jars of cookies, peanut butter boxes, and crackers and other kinds of boxed and canned foods. If it weren't for my dad's parrot, I don't know what else that guy would have taken or done in my house. I'm grateful for Kevin, and I like to think that a part of my dad is watching over me in that music bird. This story takes place when I was a junior in high school. Here's a little background information for context. I was a pretty involved student, took all the hard classes and was in a few varsity sports. One of those ways I was always busy and didn't have a lot of time for myself, and part of me was grateful that it freed me from a world where my parents had recently separated and my older brother had just gone off to college. It was just me and my younger brother, and then he was also a swimmer and a smart kid in his own right. We were still the same today, but maybe because of our family situation we were stressed out when we didn't get along very well. During those wet winter days in the Midwest I spent time in school and I had to sit through several hours of homework even while swimming. This time I had to write an essay for some advanced class that I wasn't really interested in. I dropped my swim bag at the door and looked around my house to see if anyone was home, except my dad must be out for swim practice and his club team had slots in the pool. After the high school team finished I had a glass of queso and went down to my basement office. Some school work was done. The house was a middle-class duplex. An unfinished basement, except for my dad's former office, but now I don't use this space anymore. So my family or what was left was just Quinn's office. So I walked past the concrete floor and the carpet samples and into one of the last rooms in the basement. After practice it was like any other night. I still had hours of homework left, so I turned on the computer and started typing. I was typing for what seemed like an hour, trying to explain as much or as convincingly as possible what the concept of hedonism and the picture of Dorian Gray meant to me. From the darkness I heard my little brother calling me. Queenie almost reflexively came up and I called him back. Reese, I'm working, what do you need? We'll shout into the room like brothers, but it took me a minute to realize that I hadn't heard him come home. I didn't get any response. Only for a minute. I heard my little brother's voice again. Queenie came up. It felt strange to hear these words floating across the dark concrete floor. He was supposed to be at swimming practice. I called him back and asked if he needed anything but again got no answer. I thought about starting my essay again but the family situation was at its most delicate and I didn't want to get in trouble if my little brother really needed something. I decided to get up and find out myself. I turned everything off. Basement staircase the only way a high schooler can, and I called out again for my brother. Raise, what's up? I'm really busy. I checked all around the main floor looking for my little brother or even signs he was home. No shoes, no backpack, so he wasn't home, and there was no car in the driveway either. The only reason my dad would be gone right now would be to pick him up. Satisfied, I turned back for the stairs when I heard my little brother's voice ring out, Quinny, come up. This time every hair in my body stood on end. It just didn't make sense. He had to be at practice, and if he really needed me he would have come to me. I go to the base of the second floor stairs and called out to him one more time. Raise, what's going on? Are you okay? For a minute no answer. Raise, I'm really busy. Can you tell me what's up? It's quiet for way too long. As I stared up the dark staircase, logically I had no reason to believe anyone was up there until I heard Reese's voice calmly speak, this time and not call out in his song way those same 4 words, Quinny, come up. What? I asked under my breath. I couldn't comprehend the situation. I did quick inventory of any probable scenario. Breaking wrong voice, a prank. I would have seen something at this point. It had to be Reese, and maybe helping him would make me a good brother. So I began up the stairs. My heart pounded with each step and I was about to make the landing to the dark second floor. Then I heard the buzz of the garage door motor. I ran back down the stairs and looked out the window. It was my father's sedan and him. And my little brother got out. I stumbled from the window to the hall where they would enter and I felt my heart almost stop beating. I collapsed on the floor and just started to cry uncontrollably. This was like 15 years ago now. When I was a kid I was with my best friend Jackson at some abandoned family resort or bungalow colony type place in New York. It was off a main road and then down a private dirt path driveway entrance, and it was a rather large property with a bunch of old abandoned buildings including at least 10 small bungalows, a main hall, a few bathroom stations and an indoor pool house. Along with that was an outdoor pool, a shuffleboarding area and a kids playground. Everything was old, run down and with tall overgrown grass growing over it. We found this place accidentally one time walking down Route 209, but we didn't explore it that day. We came back another night. By the time we went it was past sunset. The sun was kissing the sky goodnight. It was getting very dark, but we didn't want to come during the day. Fear of getting caught and getting charged. Were trespassing. We brought along walkie-talkies and flashlights with us to communicate to each other. When we'd split up we started looking around the bungalows together. Most of them looked the same and were relatively small, 1 or 2 beds each, a small kitchen and 1 bathroom each. Some of them had these little living room areas. Halfway looking through these bungalows I split off from Jackson because he was moving kind of slow. I tried to enter the building that looked to be the main hall or office or something, but every entrance was locked. I walkie-talkie Jackson to tell him that the big building was locked. He didn't walkie-talkie back. I wondered if I was out of range from where he was. 2 minutes later I found myself at one of the 2 bathroom buildings. It was probably a 400 square foot building. There were no doors to the building though. It was unusual. It just had 2 big openings, one for the men's room, one for the women's room. I remember the signs being faded and worn out looking. Then I saw these red marks on the dirty old concrete bathroom floor. Now I won't sit here and say they look like bloody footprints, but I couldn't explain it then and I still can't say for sure, although the inside of that bathroom around that corner was pitch black and it was the first building I was afraid to enter. I tried to talk to Jackson on the walkie again, hoping he would be in range this time. I pressed the walkie button and said, "Where are you?" When I let go I heard a beep, which I had a heart attack while receiving the walkie after getting a message from inside the bathroom. I thought Jackson was already there, so the red-looking footprints, I called his name and it echoed in the bathroom. I was actually about to step into the bathroom thinking he was hiding from me. I was kidding. I heard Jackson's voice calling from far behind me in the darkness of the night. I could hear him approaching. He couldn't see her in the dark, but she clearly saw my light. I yelled, "I got your walkie-talkie." I started to go into the bathroom, but she said again, "Don't go in, I've never been in." At this point I turned around and quickly walked out of there. I hit the talk button on my walkie-talkie very quickly, which caused another beep from inside the black women's room. Jackson and I looked at each other for a half second, then started running back the way we had come. We got back on Route 209 and we had to stop to catch our breath. At this point Jackson told me that he had been trying to walkie-talkie with me inside the bungalow, but I wasn't answering, so maybe we were outside, but then he heard a noise from the living area of the bungalow. When he turned his flashlight around, he saw an elderly woman almost running towards him. He dropped his walkie-talkie and flashlight and left the bungalow. He ran into the darkness, hiding without making a sound, because he was afraid that someone would follow him. He hid suspiciously. Time passed before he looked around and saw my flashlight. In the bathroom across the field, the most likely explanation to me was that some drug addict was hiding or living in that abandoned bungalow and for some reason jumped on Jackson and took his walkie-talkie. Who knows what he was doing in the bathroom? Maybe drugs, maybe the bathroom in the bungalow wasn't working. But what I don't know is why there was something that looked like blood there. These are my theories, but I can't explain everything, and that's the scariest part.